Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and this afternoon we'll have a look at the latest from the GFS, the GM, the ECMWF, the GFS Ensembles, and we'll finish up having a look at the UKMO Office Run as well. It is looking like we're going to be seeing some continual unsettled weather over the coming days and the next week. There are hints though, towards day 10 we could be seeing something a bit warmer and drier, but again, there are only a few ensembles and models going for that at this stage, and there is a lot of uncertainty in the longer range as ever as we transition out of summer into autumn. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and do remember to follow on Twitter as well. The link's in the description. So if we do have a look at the latest GFS, you can see at the moment we're sort of in between weather systems. We have that low pressure that gave really quite heavy rain down in the east and the south yesterday. Now that's clearing. There's maybe a few showers still around throughout today, but generally things will be a bit drier and some sunshine coming out as we do have a brief ridge of high pressure building in. So especially for England and Wales, it should be decent over the coming couple of days. However, towards Thursday evening into Friday, we do see low pressure coming back, heading towards Ireland and Scotland, which is going to be bringing the weather front back in with some heavier rain, especially in the west. Further east, it may fizzle out and turn a bit patchy and lighter. And it still depends how far eastwards it does sort of trend, and that's something we'll have to look at on the shorter range models. But at this stage, it does look like there will be another period of rain, especially in the west through Friday. And then once again, we see more low pressure trying to push in. However, we do see this signal, which we saw yesterday as well, of a bit of a Scandinavian high building, and it sort of extends and joins up with the Azores high. And we see a bit of an easterly wind. Now, this would be a decent pattern for any colder lovers in the winter. However, considering the near continent is pretty warm in September, you can see the upper air temperatures are not particularly cold at all. It's not very hot either, but temperatures will be around average, and the biggest thing with this it would be a lot drier, especially in the north towards the centre of the high. Beyond that, you can see low pressure is gathering as the Atlantic is ready to push back in, and it will be pushing weather fronts in. We could see a brief warmer spell as ever with southwesterly winds with a milder sector, where we do see temperatures could get up into the low 20s if you see some drier weather. However, it's going to be followed by a cold front, of course, as the low pressure does sweep through and we see more unsettled weather into the longer term. It doesn't look like there's going to be anything too sustained in terms of dry weather. But at the same time, we do have high pressure trying to hold off these low pressure systems, which does mean some areas will be dry at times. Other areas, though, may struggle with a lot of weather fronts pushing in and some heavier rain. If we do have a look at the GM, see how that does compare, you can see at the moment the weather system we saw yesterday moving away. Brief ridge of high pressure over the coming days, and then we see low pressure returning once again with weather fronts, which is going to mean things are going to be turning wet and windy in the west, and as I said, could potentially push further east. A bit uncertain how far east it does progress and how heavy it is. Beyond that, we see continual westerly winds, and we see that Scandinavian high building in, but it doesn't quite connect with the Azores high as much as we probably hope, as we saw in the GFS, and we do see low pressures pushing back in very quickly, and sort of by 240 hours, we are very, very unsettled once again with low pressure, westerly winds, and you can see there right towards the left of the screen out towards sort of northeast America, towards Canada, you can see ex-hurricane or an ex-tropical storm coming out into the North Atlantic, and that could power up the jet stream and give us something a bit stormy as well. You can see we have a very, very active low pressure sort of base over Iceland, very typical of autumn, as the zonal winds do start to power up significantly once again as the polar vortex takes strength. And of course, I don't show it in these videos, but the polar vortex is actually record, or going to be at record strengths at the moment, which isn't too significant for September, but we just hope that that does fade away towards winter, or we could be in for a very westerly, jet stream orientated winter. But at this stage, it is just looking like we're going to be seeing a mixed bag of unsettled weather and potentially a few drier patches here or there, especially for the south and the east. If we do have a look at the ECMWF, see how that does compare, you can see we've got the brief ridge of high pressure over the coming days, and then low pressure pushing through by Friday and Saturday. And you can see towards the longer term, we actually do build in that ridge towards sort of early next week, and that could give pretty pleasant conditions, to be honest, for a couple of days here or there, especially, as I said, towards the centre of the high, which looks on this ECMWF run for the further southwards, potentially to the west as well. However, you can see very deep low pressure systems over towards Iceland, around 275 millibars, potentially, which is pretty deep, and it could be pushing in. But you can see right towards the longer term, we do have high pressure towards Scandinavia trying to block it away, and this could bring up southerly winds and a bit of a plume of warmer air. But of course, as we're heading to the end of September, that plume of warmer air is going to be particularly hot, but you can see around 10 degrees at 850 HPA, which isn't too bad for this time of year, and could give temperatures where we see some dry weather up and around the low 20s potentially. But of course, with the warmer humid air coming up from the south, low pressure trying to push off the Atlantic, then therefore we could see a bit of a thundery breakdown potentially as the low pressure eventually wins out. And we'll have to keep an eye out in the longer term. Of course, very uncertain what we're going to be seeing sort of day 7 to day 10. But at this stage, you can see it is going to be that battle, as we have been looking over the last sort of few days, of between that high pressure towards the east of Scandinavia and Europe, and the low pressure out in the Atlantic trying to push in, getting fueled by the jet stream and those ex-tropical systems coming out of the Atlantic. And it's really putting a bit of a headache into the forecasts. If we do have a look at the GFS Ensembles, for London, you can see at the moment temperatures are going to be around or above average, and you can see for the coming days as we have that ridge over towards the south, it's going to be reasonably dry over the next sort of 2 or 3 days. Beyond that, though, we do see some more precipitation spikes, no massive deluges, so it does look like the weather fronts are going to decay as they head eastwards, as that high pressure tries to hold them off, but it still does look like we'll have some shower activity and some rain at times. And you can see, to longer term, temperatures are generally around average. At point, they go a bit above, a bit below, but generally the mean of the ensembles is average this time of year. But you can see there are some very warm ensemble members, including the operational run in the longer term, and you can see there are some cooler ensemble members in the longer term as well. And again, it all depends on the orientation of that high and the low pressure. As we saw in yesterday's video, the GEM run yesterday actually came up with a very warm run towards the longer term, with the high pressure building in towards the centre of the UK, pulling up some southerly winds. So of course, we can't rule out these sort of scenarios, and we could see sort of Indian summer pattern potentially. But at this stage, as nothing is a guarantee, and it just generally looks over the next 5 to 7 days unsettled in the west, potentially a little bit more settled in the east, but there will be some rain at times. If we do have a look at the sea level pressure, which gives us a good idea, you can see high pressure at the moment before low pressure comes in once again over sort of the Friday into the weekend, as we do see that low pressure system come in. Then we see high pressure once again returning to the south, before in the longer term it returns a bit lower, but you can see there is a lot of spread with some very deep lows, and that will be the jet stream really pushing through. Others going for higher pressure, and that would be with that Scandinavian high connecting to the Azores high, sort of taking control. And it's something we'll have to keep an eye on. If we have a look at what the north shows, if we have a look at Glasgow, you can see at the moment we've got a bit of a mixed bag as well. High pressure before trending low pressure over the coming days as those weather fronts push in. Then we see high pressure return once again. But then in the longer term, it does look like it's going to be firmly going back to lower pressure, with the majority going to around 1,010 millibars or below, which is going to be giving rain and wind, of course. And it does look like it could be pretty unsettled at times. If we do also have a look at the 850 HPA temperature and precipitation, you can see over the next sort of 5 to 7 days, there's going to be a lot of precipitation spikes around. Nothing massive at this stage, as of course the low pressure is getting squeezed by the high pressure, and that means the weather fronts are going to decay a little bit as they head eastwards. But there will be rain and cloud around. The temperatures are going to be around or above average, which is pretty typical of a westerly sort of flow. In the long term, though, you can see there are a lot more precipitation spikes. So you can see a lot more of the ensembles are really pushing those lows more progressively through the country. And you can see temperatures are, again, around average. Not too much deviation. So it is like, again, a pretty guaranteed westerly flow. And that's something we need to keep an eye on, of course. Again, this is not too untypical for sort of autumnal patterns, but we'd hope to sort of see this sort of breakaway as we head into winter. Or if we see this pattern continue through winter, we could be seeing a lot of mild and wet weather, similar to what we saw in the winter of 2019-2020, where we had a lot of named storms and a lot of westerly winds and very, very little cold weather. Now again, we are a couple months away, of course, from having any real cold potential, but we've got to keep an eye on trends, and at this stage it's not looking too encouraging. But a lot can change, of course. We are a good 2 months away from the first potential for snow and cold weather in the north and over hills, so it's just something we need to keep an eye on. If we now finish up by having a look at the UKMO Office Run, we'll have a look at the precipitation first, and then we'll have a look at the temperatures. You can see today a few showers in the west, but nothing too much. Over northern Scotland, potentially a bit of heavier rain, but again, nothing too significant. Beyond that, as we push into sort of Thursday into Friday, see those weather fronts gathering, as we saw on the pressure charts. Very heavy rain heading through Friday, and you can see quite an active front pushing through by Friday evening into Saturday. But you can see as it progresses eastwards, it sort of fizzles away, and we see a bit of heavy rain potentially in the southeast, but again, nothing too significant. That's why on those ensemble charts, there's not particularly good agreement on how much rain we're going to be seeing, especially in the east and the south. Beyond that, we see more weather front trying to push through by Sunday, push through a bit more progressively by sort of Sunday evening, potentially turning into a more showery, heavier band. But beyond that, just looks like showers through Monday. And again, we hope high pressure is going to be building in for early next week, so it should cut out the shower risk, at least in the south for a time. But it does look like many areas are going to be continually seeing some showers, some strong winds, and some unsettled weather at times. And it is, of course, pretty autumnal. You can't really expect too much different from this at this time of year. But hopefully we do see some more dry weather over the coming weeks. As I know, of course, probably the worst weather for most people is sort of the heavier rain, a lot of showers around, and the fact that you can't really plan anything, as pretty much every day has forecasted sort of 50% chance of showers. So we'll have to keep an eye on what happens in the longer term. There is encouraging signs of some high pressure, especially in the south and east in the longer term, and even the shorter term next week, but it doesn't look too sustained. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.